Well, good morning, ladies. So today we're going to work on the Santa Joy project. I'm Jillybean Fitzhenry. I'm from Savage, Minnesota. I'm going to give you some tips and tricks for different ways of shading and highlighting and blending. And so we'll just kind of go through everything one little step at a time. To start with, I'm going to go over the brushes that we need. So I'm going to go ahead, switch the camera. So to start with, let's talk about the brushes you're going to need. Um, I used, of course, a big brush for base coating the background. And I used the aquamarine that is in the Deco Art Traditions, but anything close to that was going to be fine. You should have in your instructions the complete conversion chart for Americana, so I'll try to remember to mention the Americana color as we go as well. So Americana, it was 2 parts mermaid tail, 1 part blue turquoise, and that came up pretty close to the aquamarine. Okay, so I base coated, but for brushes, um, I like to use a couple different angle brushes. You certainly can use flat brushes if you prefer. I just like the long tip because it helps me to get into little areas better. So either, angles or flats are going to be just fine. We're going to be using a rake brush for doing the beard. And I'm going to talk to you when we get to that stage. Sometimes I like to have a smaller one too. And so I actually nip off a little on each side. And I'll demonstrate that as well when we get to that stage. You're going to need a small liner brush or a script for detail. And then I've got what is called a rigger, and this is just used for doing the lettering, but you certainly could use a little bit bigger liner for that. What's different between a rigger and a liner is the rigger has a flat tip when you kind of pinch the bristles out. It'll be flat across the top instead of pointed like a liner. And so when you go to do the lettering, you get that little bit of a square advantage for doing the lettering, but you can make it work with any type of liner as well. I've got the Jillybean Dirty Dancer, and what this is, there's a pointed round on one side. I'll get that wet so you can see a little better. Pointed round on one side, and then a dry brush blender on the other side. You certainly could use just a regular round brush and a regular blender brush. I like to do this because I'll put the color on, flip it over, and blend right away. It just keeps me from having to keep picking up brushes along the way. But before I had this designed for me, I did use just a regular round and a regular blender. So about a number 2 round, 2 or a 3. You could even probably make a 4 work, but nothing bigger than a 4 for a round. And then for the blender, if you don't have a blender, another option would be a filbert. You could use a filbert to blend, but use it dry. So I'll give you some options as we get into the piece. And then at the very end of the piece, I spatter with a fan brush to get all the little snow, and I'll be tapping that and spattering snow. You could use lots of different brushes. I just like a fan brush because I'm able to manipulate the snow a little bit better. And I don't do the trick where you're spraying it with your finger because that makes more mess. When I do the spatter with this, I'm going to be tapping it on top of another brush, and I can keep it real close to my project, and then I don't have it all over my painting area. So I'll show you that at the very end too. Okay. To start with, though, what we want to do is we want to get our background in here. And so I've got the aquamarine on here. I'm actually going to put some tape across the top here so I don't mess in. So if you want to tape off your top section, if you've got those scrolls, put a piece of tape across there, whether it's painter's tape or you can use the regular Scotch Magic tape, anything to just keep it from going into your scroll area. Okay, then I'm going to start with phthalo blue, or you can use primary blue in Americana. And I'm just going to squeeze a little bit of that out. Okay, and I am going to put some of my original base coat color out too, just in case I need to do some flip-flopping with that. And I'm going to need some white. So I've got the titanium white. So phthalo blue, aquamarine, and titanium white. So in Americana, it would be primary, your mix for your aquamarine, and then your titanium white in that as well. Okay. All right, let's get this here. I think I'll put my water right there. Let's get it all in view so you can watch me go between the sections. All right, so to start with, I'm going to moisten, and I'm going to use my bigger brush here to moisten just with water. Okay, so I I could be using, the extender blending medium, but then it takes too long to dry. So I really just moisten lots of paint, or lots of water. Really work that into the surface. And then what I want to do is I want to get the two opposite corners to be darker. So I'm going to wet my angle brush, my 1/2 inch angle, and I'm going to get a little bit of the phthalo blue, kind of wipe the extra off, and I'll do like a slip slap, like I'm making an X. And I'm going to put some in each of the corners. And I want it a little bit darker in the very corners, and then let it kind of blend in towards the center. If I get too much, I can go backwards with the aqua color, the aquamarine, so that I just kind of let it run out. And I can always put more on if I decide I want it darker. I'm going to do the same thing in the opposite corner. I'm going to go ahead and start in the corner, a slip slap like I'm making the letter X. Get it darker in the corner, fade into the aquamarine towards the center. And if it starts drying out, just get a little bit more water on your brush. I do want those corners much darker, so I'm going to put one more little coat on there. I was a little skimpy, but it's better to go a little bit slow and then come back and add more. Get more water on the brush as I walk away from that corner. And wipe your brush on your paper towel if you get too much paint. You can always, clean the brush and just use a clean wet brush for the final blending towards that middle. But if I need to go back and add a little bit of the aquamarine, I'll start in the clean area and walk towards my darker. There again, just doing that slip slap. Want kind of a mottled background. I don't want to see a definite stopping point. I want it to just kind of blend together a little bit. And remember, you're going to have your Santa in this, bottom corner here. So I'm not quite as worried about where the design is going to be, that it blends, just perfect. You'll probably want to have a hair dryer on hand when we get all this part done so that we'll be able to dry it good and then get our pattern put on. Okay, I also want to add somewhere in the area here where I'm going to have my word joy. I want that to be a little bit brighter. So I'm going to add some white in there, but I'm going to come back also and soften that a little bit with my aqua. And I could have just put some aqua down first so that it was wet and then blended. Okay, so right now you can see all around the edges here. You can see where I definitely stopped, and I don't want that. So I clean my brush, just have water, and just catch that edge with water to get that to blend in. Keep wiping your brush off because you'll be picking up paint. Just a soft touch. You don't want to be smashing it in, just barely touching that edge to get that to blend in just a little bit better. So you've got a little bit of a highlight. You're not trying to make it a smooth blend. You're trying to make it a mottled look so that it'll blend in, but not a super blend like you would do like a satin ribbon. Let's see, get mine plugged in. I'm going to use a heat gun because it's not as noisy. I just don't want to get so close that I burn the wood. So, all right, so if you've got this part done, then what I want you to do is go ahead and transfer your design on. I'll get this on best I can. There. So I can pull my tape off now, and I'll just reuse that to put my pattern on. Okay, so I'm going to use white graphite, I think. Put that under in a stylus and get all my lines traced on. Now it's usually better if you've transferred it onto tracing paper so that if you make a mistake or you need to retrace something, you can place it on better. But because it's my design, I know how to make the corrections, so I didn't do that. Also, if you get the transparent vellum, you can actually print the pattern out from your printer on vellum paper and not have to trace it. So that's a nice little trick also. You don't need all the lines of the beard. You just want a couple so that you get them going in the right direction. You definitely want the outside edge of the beard or the curls, but all those little lines in the middle are not necessary. Just a couple to make sure you got the right direction for the flow of the hair. This piece could be, even adapted onto a round piece too. You just have to pull the beard a little bit fuller at the bottom. So I'm thinking he'd be cute on a charger plate. Enlarge him just a little bit. just the shape of the head. Just the shape. Okay. And I'll get, now for the lettering, I like to just put a line right in the middle and then I go ahead and make it thicker or thinner in the areas that I want, rather than trying to worry about staying in the line. So I just go right through the center. And the star, I'm just going to do the outer star because whatever the thickness is of my brush is going to be okay. And I'm not going to do all the details either on around the star. I think it's easier to use like the wooden end of the brush and a stylus, and then we just have our little teardrop. So maybe the teardrop and the biggest circle, but don't do anything else. Let's now lift up, see if I missed anything. I think that's good enough. Okay. All right. So then what I want to do is I want to start basing in the areas. So I always like to start with the face first because that takes a couple of coats. And I use the warm beige in Americana, basically because it's already a color mix that I like. Now I could mix this, you know, with Traditions or any other thing too, but it's already the color I want. So I'm just going to go ahead and start with that. I use the pointed round to fill in, or any kind of a round brush to fill in. Now I want to go through the eye area too, so don't base coat and try to avoid where the eye is, because you need that to be that lighter color in order for the other colors to work. The other thing is, where you have your fur, when you're basing this in, you want it to be choppy up there with this color. Otherwise you're going to have a hard ridge, and that's going to show through your fur. So we'll be needing a couple coats of this, so we'll get one coat on and then continue with the other areas to get them filled in. And you want to get the lip. And then let those dry a little bit. Now, if I decide that I didn't like the outer shape of the nose the way I got it, I'll take my aquamarine and I'll reshape that nose so that it's a better shape. Okay, now the hat is burgundy. Traditions has discontinued the burgundy that I originally used, but it can be easily mixed. 2 parts naphthol red light, 1 part dioxazine purple. And if you don't have Traditions, you can use 4 parts primary red in Americana, 1 part lamp black, and you can get your burgundy color. I used to, quite a while ago, I would use the deep burgundy, but it was too transparent. And when you mix colors, they become more opaque. So rather than trying to do 10 coats with that other one, it's easier to do a mix and then you have less base coating. So I'm going to just fill in the burgundy in the hat, There again, I want it choppy where it touches the fur so that I'm not going to end up with a ridge there. And I always try to pull my brush strokes in the direction of the object so that if I do end up with little ridges, at least they're going in the right direction. And it looks like it's part of the piece. It'll just look like it's part of the wrinkles in the hat. And I want to get this to go all the way to that back edge. So if you need to add a little bit more beyond your pattern, that's okay. You want it to look like it's going off the piece. Now I can do mine in one coat with this original burgundy, but if you need a second coat, that'll be fine. Just get one coat on for now and we'll get all the other areas and then come back and do another coat on the areas that need another coat. Now my face is dry already, so because that's an important area, I'm going to go ahead and get a second coat on there right now because I really want to make sure that I've got a nice solid coat. And the reason I use a round brush to base coat, or else I would use a filbert, is because I can actually get a thicker coat than if I use an angle or a flat. So I don't need as many coats if I use a round or a filbert to base. It allows me to put the paint on a little bit heavier. And I'm not watering it down if I can help it. If it's fresh from the bottle, you should not need to add any water. So I've got my second coat of my warm beige on my lip and on the face. So when I put my paint on heavy, in fact, I'm going to zoom in a little bit more here. I might have little ridges in the middle. So what I do is I get up on the very, very tips and just tickle where any of those brush marks might be in the center of my area to soften them. Just barely, barely catch any little ridge that I might have. Okay, then I'm going to need the black. So either lamp black or carbon black in the traditions, either one. Okay, so a lot of times if you're working on an ornament or a really little piece, even a 1/4 inch might be too big. So I like to create a 1/8 inch to use as well. So what I do is, I'm going to move this aside because I'm going to have hair all over the place now. And what I do is I nip it right at the ferrule on each side and nip off a little bit on each side till it's the length I want it to be, or the the thickness that I want it to be. And so that way I can use it for little tiny details too. So just nip it right off at the ferrule, and then you've got a smaller brush. And all these brushes are available on my website. And if you ever need me to go ahead and trim it for you, I'll be happy to do that too if you want to order that way. I really like the black silver rake because it's got a little bit stiffer hairs than some of the other rake brushes, and so it allows me to get a little bit more detail. Okay, so now I want to get the black fur above him and below in the little ball. So I'm going to take the rake and I'm going to thin that black with water. I want it to be able to come off the brush. So about like liner brush consistency. Very inky. Okay. All right, then I want to get, you're not going to see a lot of detail on this. I'm going to hold it a little bit more sideways to get the fur a little bit more at a chisel to pull that fur out in the front. Because if I pull the whole brush, it's going to be fat. So let me show you that actually on this paper here. So if I pull like this, they all kind of stop too much the same, okay, pulling the flat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to twist my brush at a little bit more of an angle so that I can pull thinner strokes like that, rather than a big long fat stroke. Okay, so a little bit more on the chisel edge and fill in that fur. And I'm just gonna get all of that filled in. I'm gonna come over the face a little bit, but I'll do more after I'm sure that I've got enough coats on my face. So, and then just fill in the center. Okay, and then for the little ball, there again, just filling in with little feathery strokes. And get that little ball filled in. When you get that done, go back, check the face again. Do you need one more coat? And I think I do. Check the face, check your hat. See if you want any more. I'm going to get one last coat on my face. So then the other areas will be the holly is going to be a pine green if you're using traditions, or let's see, it is a mix of leaf green and plantation pine if you're using Americana. And it's basically just kind of using kind of a medium to dark green color. And I'm going to just use my little pointed round on my Dirty Dancer to go ahead and fill those in as well. And the berries, I'm going to undercoat them with flesh color with that warm beige, because then the red color will show up better. Coral is another color I like to undercoat berries with if you're going to make a red on top, because red by nature is transparent. So you usually need a little something underneath, whether it's a pink or a coral or the warm beige, little something to make that show up better. And I may mess into the berries, but by basing in at least just this color, it's going to help remind me where they are. Once you get all those areas based in, I want to make sure that you have the face really dry before you transfer the face. Now mine is dry already. I can't believe how fast this is drying. Okay, and I'm just going to go ahead and sketch mine in, but you go ahead and put your pattern back on. So I've got the perimeter of the eye, I've got a line for the iris, and another for the pupil. And then there's a line up above, which is your eyelid, and it's going to come down and kind of curve out for the crow's feet. And you got under the eye also kind of a bag, and there again curves kind of into the cheek, and then I'll be adding, you know, some more wrinkles in there wherever they need to be. And I've got the nose. I want to get the nostril, and then the opening under the nose. And we got an eyebrow up there. Okay, now we're going to be starting with the face and the details in the face. So I'm going to get another palette here that might be a little easier to move. I do want to use extender blending medium, and you can either use the Traditions or you could use Josonia's retarder. They both work equally well, and I've used them both. Okay, but I'm going to take a little container and I'm just going to pour a little bit of the extender blending medium in that, because I'm going to be using that instead of water for my blending. Okay, once you get your face traced on, I think it's helpful to get the eye base coated in so that you have something to kind of look at. So either use your liner or your rigger for filling in the sections of the eye. The round might be a little too big, but I want white in the very corner of the eye. So titanium white in that little corner. And I'm just still using water when I base coat, if I need water. And then you've got your iris, which is the aquamarine. So it's kind of like a curved stripe. And then the pupil is black. I can fill in his eyebrow though with little black lines, and that I'm just going to use a liner brush. Not necessary to use the rake because it's too small of an area. And if you start pulling on the small end, doing little choppy lines on the small or the outside edge of the eyebrow, and then kind of pulling towards the front, and then it kind of pivots in the front of the eye there for the direction that the lines go. Okay, now when I filled my eye in, I feel like I got too big of a bump right here. So all I have to do is take some flesh tone, that warm beige, and I can just crop off some of that eye there to reshape it a little bit. I think I got it just too big of a bump. Okay, well then we're going to start with some shadow color. Now I do mix a little bit of burnt sienna and the warm beige together to get my shading. Whenever I start with a mix, I always try to see if half and half is a good recipe, because that's easy to remember. If it's too dark, you add a little bit more of the lighter. If it's too light, you add a little bit more of the dark. So I'm going to take burnt sienna and warm beige and put the same amount of little droplets next to each other, and then mix those together. Now, whenever you have trouble blending, if the contrast is too dramatic, there's too big of a change, that's usually the problem. You need to bring the two colors closer together. So I'm thinking I would go for this color, but to be safe, I'm going to ask you to put a little bit more warm beige so it's not quite so dramatic. Let's do two drops of warm beige, 1 drop of burnt sienna. So 2 to 1. A little less contrast so that you'll have an easier time blending, especially if you're just starting with this extender method. Now, you could probably do it with water too, but boy, you got to work a lot faster. So it really, and we're going to be careful about the amount of extender we use. Usually people get too much extender, and that's where you have problems blending, because it just gets too soupy. We want it just enough that we have time to blend. Okay, now there's a couple different ways of using the extender. On larger pieces, I might moisten the area first with extender, okay? On smaller pieces, I just use it in my brush. So I really think we're going to try just using it in our brush, because if I moisten this and it's this little, I think that you're going to have a hard time, that it's going to get too soupy. So we're going to try just in the brush first. Okay. All right, so here's what I do. I'll have you take a look up at the screen. So I'm going to wet the round side, wipe it on my towel, wet the blender, wipe it on my towel really, really good. Okay. So I have extender blending medium in both ends of my brush. Okay, now I'm going to pick up a little bit of the shadow color that I mix, and I'm patting that into the brush. I want it in the brush, not just on the outside. I really want to plump that in there. And so what I'm doing is that little bit of extender that was in my brush to moisten it, and remember I blotted it off, so it's not much. It's still in there really, really well. Okay, so now we're going to be looking at this photo here to go by to get our shadows in, okay? So if you have your little step-by-steps handy. Okay, so I'm going to start in this top corner and I'm laying the color in solid. And let's just try it just on that outside edge. It's a good place to start. Now you see I have a hard edge here. I want to flip my brush over, just barely catch, soft touch, and just blend away that hard edge. But I want that dramatic dark color to stay on the outside. So it's only where I stopped that I want it to blend. Okay, so now I'm going to zoom in more so you'll be able to see my whole piece. Okay, so I just softened just where I stopped with that color. In between, I'll be getting, my brush will get dirty, so I go in a circle like this on my paper towel. And that's also going to tell me if my brush was clean or not. If it was dirty, I'll pick up more extender and do it again to get it cleaned. Okay, now if my paint gets dry, I will just add a teeny touch of extender into the paint, not water, extender. If I have to clean my brush in between colors, I clean it in water, but then I always redress it with extender blotted on the towel before I go to my other color again. And I'll keep reminding you of all these steps each time we do them. Okay, so I did that little corner, but then you're going to see it comes up above that line and it's going to go down in front of the eye. And I've got a pretty, heavy coat of paint. Flip my brush and soften that edge to blend it in. Now, it's always easier to point your brush towards the area, so flipping it upside down will help. If I get too much, I can actually use extender to remove it. So if it's not blending, I'm going to dip my blender brush in extender, blot it on the towel, and try again. Try to just use a real soft touch. If I take too much off, I'll go back and add more. And I can always go back and put more flesh in that eyelid after too. I'm just more worried about getting all of this to soften in. And like I said, if I was too skimpy, I can always go back at any time and put another coat on. Because I want in the darkest areas, I want it to be pretty solid. And then I just want to blend it on the edge where it's supposed to blend into the face itself, into that flesh. And then I'm going to go under that bag, under the eye, right into the crow's foot, into the cheek. And I'm going to soften that, flip my brush over, soften that edge, gentle touch. If you're having trouble blending, try adding a little bit more flesh tone, that warm beige, to your mix and lighten it up a little bit more, because sometimes it's just that you've jumped too much in contrast. Okay, so I'm going to actually show you now right here where the cheek is. I'm going to show you how you can correct mistakes. Okay, so let's say I got this too dark, or I came in too far with this color. So I'm going to pull it in quite a ways there. What I would do is I would stop and clean my brush, clean it in water, blot it on the towel, dip it back into the extender again, blot it good on the towel, and then I'm going to pick up my flesh tone, or my, sorry, the old name used to be flesh tone. It's now warm beige, and I keep calling it by the old name. Load the brush with the, pat that in there with the flesh or the warm beige. And then I'm going to come and I start in the clean area, okay? Let's see, I gotta tip this. I think I'm getting a little bit of a shine. See if I can tip this better so you can see. Let me find the right angle here. Maybe about there. Okay, so I'll put it in the clean area, butt it up against the edge that I'm trying to soften, flip my brush, and try to blend those two colors together. And see, I can get a much nicer blend then. But always start in the clean area, pull it up against the dark, and then straddle your brush on top of both the dark and the light and blend those together. So that's an easy way to fix any problem areas. And you can do it before or after this is dried. Now I know he looks really funny right now. It looks like we kind of got a little racetrack going on there, but he's going to get better. Just try to do it at one step at a time. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my dark color again. So I rinsed my brush in water, re-put extender in it, and then had to reload with my shadow color. Okay, so I want to get some little crow's feet, however many you can fit in there, and just make them little lines for now. Okay, if you want to do just a soft little tap to soften them a bit, that's fine, but we're going to come back with a lighter color in there afterwards.